Today we're happy to welcome Javier Gonzalez-Meeks, Associate Professor of History at Grossmont College, who previously enlightened us on topics about San Diego history and California history, including the real Zorro and Black Cowboys. And he will join us today to bring clarity in another chapter, Demystifying Aztec Culture. Please join me in welcoming Javier Gonzalez-Meeks.
Thank you, Rancho Bernardo Museum, for inviting me back again. This is a great privilege to be back. And I see a lot of familiar faces, so this is great. It's good to see you back. So we're going to look at our topic, Demystifying Aztec Culture. Before we do that, because I am a historian, we have to kind of lay the groundwork, right, in talking about our history. So, who are the Aztecs? Well, their real name is Mexica. That's the Nahuatl name, Mexica. It's actually, if you look at the country of Mexico, it's also a Nahuatl name. And take the A out, but the O, it means land of the Mexica. Oh, fascinating, right? So Mexica. So where did we get Aztec from? Aztec is from the oral stories from the Mexica, the mystical land that they're from. Right, the founding land. They were nomadic people wandering around. We don't know exactly where. Scholars speculate present day like Guanajuato or Zacatecas, kind of like the central or northern parts of Mexico. But nomadic people, and they were one of many nomadic people. In their story, there were one of 7 in this nomadic group chain. They're the last ones to make it down to the Valley of Mexico. Why the Valley of Mexico? Like Zacatecas region is right around this area right here in northern Mexico. The Valley of Mexico itself is an altiplano. It's a high volcanic ridge. So volcanic soil means great agricultural soil. I mean, look at Iceland, if you're familiar with Iceland geography. I mean, just plentiful of agriculture. And so even right here, the altiplano, the volcanic soil provides for great agriculture. And we'll talk about like the agricultural corns, beans, and squash that are vital for not just the Mexica Aztecs, but for a lot of Mesoamerican cultures as well. So, Aztec. Well, the mystical land of where they're from, we don't know exactly where, was Aztlan. So, it's actually, the land they're from is Aztlan. And it was actually an 18th century, 19th century scholar who got tired of writing Mexicans and Mexicans. Right? So you had political Mexicans, and then you had the Mexicans. So he got tired of going back for like, which one am I talking about? I'm just going to write Aztec. So that's how we got Aztec. So scholar was tired, he got lazy, and so that's how we got stuck with it. But they're the Mexica, that is what they've been called, that's how they call themselves. One of the major languages in this region is Nahuatl, and it's still spoken today. It's a widely still spoken language, still today. Matter of fact, there was actually a Mexican citizen who, working with Google, was able to put the Nahuatl language to be used for Google Translate. So that's kind of interesting. So it's still around, still a living language that we see. You got scared of me, Peggy. And so the Mexica, when they migrate in, there was a power vacuum. The previous political state was the Toltecs. They were very centralized military power. They got overthrown, and that allowed for a power vacuum in the Valley of Mexico, and that allowed for the Mexica to migrate into what is now Lake Texcoco, present-day Mexico City. So when the Mexica get there, they're just one of different nomadic groups integrating themselves. Lake Texcoco itself is it's not a deep lake. It's about 6 to 8 feet deep. Some parts very brackish. So it's not a deep lake. What's also interesting, there's no outpour for like heavy rain. So there would be heavy flooding, especially around these coastal lake side towns as well. So what we have is Lake Texcoco. Eventually, because the Mexica would get into a little bit of trouble, it's not a centralized political state. They would hire themselves as warriors, as mercenaries. And they got really good at it. Really good at it. And they were seen as a threat because of military prowess, their knowledge, and this one king will kick them out into this little, like a island that was just made of this rocks and cactus and snakes. Pretty much that was their death bed. Like, we're tired of them, they're getting too popular, let's just get rid of them, they'll die out. But that, for the Mexica, they're nomadic people. They're hard people. Everywhere they travel, they'll set up, I mean, from, let's say, present-day Zacatecas, all the way down in Mexico, they created their own cities, they interacted with other groups, they fought with other groups, so they kept migrating, kept moving. They're very, they were not easily kind of just, done. So in this incident, this getting exiled to this lake island was like, all right, fine, let's figure it out. And it's from this that they'll have their founding of Tenochtitlan. And the story goes is that their supreme god, Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, sent a sign. And on this land, they'll find an eagle devouring a snake on a cactus. And there's a lot of symbolism with that, because this is also the center part of the Mexican flag. But Huitzilopochtli is also represented as an eagle. And a lot of the text is not so much the eagle devouring, but the eagle with the snake. It's not so much devouring, because the snake also represents another deity, Quetzalcoatl. So you have Huitzilopochtli, their main god of war, and Quetzalcoatl, the god of wisdom. So violence and wisdom, this kind of duality, right? And that's something that's going to be really big we're going to come back to again, is this duality with the Mexica Aztecs. So it's in this region where the Aztecs start to create Tenochtitlan. This is an artist's recreation of it, but it was like this just forbidden island, and then they started to expand out and create these artificial land beds. And this is what I'm going to show you. They created an engineering marvel called Cannibals. And essentially, because the ground is 6-8 feet, what they'll do is they'll use corn, and they'll create these artificial land beds with reeds and mud from the ground. It's floating, and then with the corn root will go and attach itself to the lake bottom. And that's how they get to anchor these floating land beds. So they create these artificial land beds. It's also safe from other little predators, mice, and all that. But the ingenious part is something that was already practiced already in Mesoamerica, and that is, they call it the three sisters. The corn, beans, and squash. The corn itself draws nitrogen out from the soil, where the squash actually puts the nitrogen back into the soil, and the bean sprouts have little prickles on it to protect it. So right here you have like a full, well-balanced meal. Corn, bean, and squash. Have some fish. You have a complete meal right there. So with this, they're going to build and expand a major political center, a major city of Tenochtitlan. They also create dikes, because also some parts of that swampy area of Lake Texcoco was brackish. So it's a combination of the fresh and salt water. You can't use that for agriculture. So they'll create dikes as a way to separate out the fresh and salt water, also create little dams as a way to prevent a lot of the overflow from the rainwater. A cataclysmic flood on Tenochtitlan, like anything, trial and error, and they was like, hey, big flood, we gotta figure this out. And so they create all these engineering marvels. They also created an aqueduct coming from the fresh springs of Chapultepec to bring fresh water into the city. So people have fresh water. They also have gardens for the rulers, so they can water their flowers. And something that's quite interesting, because what are you going to do with a lot of your, there's no toilets. You don't put it in your lake bed. What they would actually do is collect it and use it for fertilizer. So they will recycle it. They actually have canoes where they'll collect it and they'll just recycle it and use it for fertilizer. So you have all these ingenious ways. They're not going to dirty the water. They'll use the filth, the human feces, as fertilizer. And it's not that bad. I mean, it's just processed the king's corn, beans, and squash already, and whatever other protein they might be eating as well with it. So you have these fascinating engineering and architectural kind of ways, agricultural ways of the Mexica expanding out Tenochtitlan. And also it's a lot right here. This slide right here is from Bernardo Diaz. Bernardo Diaz was the conquistador, and he's talking about Tenochtitlan. And the first highlight part, there was one square twice as large as that of the city of Salamanca. Now, Salamanca was a major city in Spain. A major city with universities It's like when Stanford University out here in California gets called like, ooh, it's the Harvard of the West, right? It's like, ooh, we should be so thrilled. It's kind of like that. Kind of like, wow, he was amazed. There's nothing here in the text that really saying, oh, look what's nasty that's going on. He's just amazed how big the city is, how many people are there, the type of things they're buying and selling, all kinds of merchandise, food, jewels, gold, silver, brass, copper, tin, stones, shells, whole variety of things. This large marketplace, talking about streets for game, different fowls, birds, different skins of different animals, the type of other animals to eat, not to eat, apothecaries. I think this is cool, barbershops. Like, how cool is that? They have barbershops, right? They have to cut their hair. They have barbershops. And also restaurateurs. They have little taco shops. They had taco shops. Right? And what's also going to be very important, especially for the Spaniards, is the porters. These are men that are just carrying everything. And a lot of them, they are either prisoners of war or war captives. And one thing to keep in mind, and we'll talk about it, as the Mexica Empire starts to expand, they are not a centralized empire. It's a hegemonic empire. It's based on tribute. So a lot of times, and they allow for different city-states to maintain their autonomy, they're just like, hey, next season, right, make sure you bring some workers in, right? It'll be like, hey, next season for Rancho Bernardo, we need this over here for your how to support the museum, right? But in a nicer way, right? And so it's a tribute-based system. And the different tribute that's coming in is going to allow for the splendor of Tenochtitlan, for different articles of clothing. Feathers are very important within Mexica society because birds, they fly from in the sky, the heavens, and they're on earth. So they have, again, this duality of the birds. The jaguar, the power of the jaguar, all of these things that reflect a very cosmopolitan, very trade-rich center. And the legacy that's left behind. Right? Even chocolate. I mean, we get the now word chocolate, right? Chocolate. And this was their major form of currency. It wasn't gold. We have stories where some Toltecs or Tlaxcalans, when they went with the Spaniards to Europe, the Spanish in their vessels, some of the chocolate beans fell. And they jumped on them. That's money. That's currency. Gold will fall down like, okay, whatever. But it's a different mindset, right? So chocolate was a major form of currency. It was drank by the elites. And now the hot chocolate was drunk a lot differently. And a thick corn mash in it, as well as chiles. So it was a little spicy. It's a spicy, thick chocolate drink. And eventually become the chocolate that we're used to now, milk or sugar. Even tamales comes from the Nahuatl word tamal, wrapped. And this was actually food that a lot of the warriors would carry through. This is before burritos, right? Before breakfast burritos and stuff. So the warriors would have little satchels. And they could pack three little tamales in there. And it's already pre-wrapped. You had the corn leaves or banana leaves that wrap them around. It preserves it, keeps it warm. They have the food. So we still have a lot of these traditions still used today. Even the taco. Now this has not controversy, but where the origin came from. Was it from the city? I will talk about Tlacopan. It was a major city with an alliance with the Mexica, or it was something like the action of it, putting something in the middle. Regardless, we had tacos, and we still have tacos. On Taco Tuesday, right? So the traditions that are still around that have been carried on. So from the 1300s, from the founding of Tenochtitlan to about 100 years, we see the growth of the Mexica. And they'll have its own moments of waning in power and falling in power. And eventually, Tenochtitlan will be a rival to a lot of other city-states. And they'll start to align themselves with two other city-states, Tlaxcala and Tlacopan. It becomes the Triple Alliance. And it's within these groups, these three, that they'll elect their leaders. So it's not dynastic. Right? It will be through nobility, but it's like, hey, within the nobility, which son, which of these young men shall we choose? Right? Which one is more worthy to lead? And you can see right here in our map, this is the major area of control by the Triple Alliance. And then the darker, right around here, are the tributary states. Hundreds of different tributary states all have their own power, still have their own leaders, but they owe tribute seasonally to Tenochtitlan and to the Triple Alliance. But then there's this right here. It's not a mistake. You have Tlaxcala, never lost to the Mexica. Never bent the knee to the Mexica. So when we talk about the greatness of Mexica warriors, and we will see, these are Tlaxcalans, never bent the knee. They never lost. Even when Mexica went a little further up north, they'll lose to Totemex and other groups. So yeah, the Mexica were great in fighting, yes. And what we're going to see is there were others that were even better as well. And so what we see is this is going to lay the scene for us, because this is going to be very helpful when we start talking about the conquest of Tenochtitlan very soon. So the politics and society is quite interesting. It's a very socially stratified society, but it allows for social mobility. It allows for social mobility through the ranks of commoners and merchants. Slaves, if a slave wasn't just someone who passed on that institution, if the slave was allowed to get married, a slave's children were free and not considered slaves. A slave could inherit money, could buy money, right? So even the institution, and a whole institution, but a lot different than we're going to see later come in with colonial European ideas of slavery. So it allowed for social mobility. You know, we have kings, we have priestly class, nobles, we have warriors, we have merchants, we have artisans, we have farmers, and then our slaves and our porters, those that do a lot of the heavy work for the city, for Tenochtitlan. And what we also get is universal education. Universal education, like 1300s. This is Black Death era in Europe, right? Soon in the 1400s, you have the Italian Renaissance. You have the discussion of the women question. I know it sounds horrible. Where do women fit into society? They're weak, but where do they fit in? That's not me saying it. It's not me saying it. Please, it's not me saying it. But those are the discussions going on. And here you have universal education for all children. For the elites, there's certain colleges they have to go to so they can fulfill a role. For the commoners, they go to school too. And it's, when we look at it, it's gendered, yes. But within Aztec society, Mexica society, it wasn't seen as just like men only and girls only. Men and women were considered two halves of the same. They complemented each other. So even though women were in charge of the household, they relied on the man to bring home the food, to protect the house, to bring nourishment to the house, right? So they have this duality, this kind of in the Mexica society, even with women. If a woman died in childbirth, and as sad as it is, she would get an honorary funeral like a Mexica warrior would. Two halves, a woman fighting in battle with pregnancy. And this is before epidurals and all you ladies coming children. I can't imagine. I've seen 2 births already. I couldn't hang. I still like shin the other day, and I was like laying down like, ah, I hurt myself. I noticed my shin. And so like here you have these women, these mothers that are revered, right? In the same level as a warrior. So that's quite fascinating. So we have this, you have this division of gender, but it's what we see is complementary, right? Because that Aztec warrior is going to rely on the clothing. He's going to rely on the tortillas that are going to be made, the nourishment. Just like the fish is going to provide nourishment for the children, the pregnant mother. So you have this interesting relationship. And we see that play out also sometimes in their deities, right? I didn't put their names on here because it would just fill up the whole screen. But you have like Huitzilopochtli, the god of war, the manifestation of war. Then you have Tlaloc, the god of rain. And you can see him here with the corn stalk. Here's our god of wisdom, Quetzalcoatl. And here's our very scary one, our god, mother goddess. I know, right? It's just think of like a little Mexican mom with a little chancla, right? The little snake face. But the godmother, right? Do you have the goddess? And so they all represent different aspects. But we also see some fascinating things because a lot of the texts that we get are from Spanish. A lot of it is the books that the Mexica wrote have been destroyed. And a lot that are saved provide us some interesting insights. But a lot that were written during The colonialism is usually by younger indigenous children, young men, writing with the Spaniard looking right down on them, like, hey, don't forget how bloodthirsty you are. Yeah, see, brother, yeah. So writing that, right? Hey, don't remember about this and that. So we also going to see ideas of Spanish Christian Catholicism play out, especially like same-sex relationships, punishments of that. Like, how much do we know of like same-sex relationships in Mexica society? It's hard to say. But when we look at some of their deities, like this one right here, she's the goddess of filth. She eats filth, right? Like poop and sin, anything nasty. But when we look at it, she's also the goddess of fertility, right? So how can our poor little babies be filthy and gross? They're cute, right? So you have this interesting duality of life and all sin. And not sin like Christian sin, but like just evilness. This interesting relationship. The same with Galchi Wiki. She's usually seen as a counterpart to Tlaloc. She's the goddess of the lakes. And again, the duality, right? Water brings life, but also death with floods. So this interesting duality that we see playing in, and we also kind of see that represented in Mexica society, in their social structure, and what is considered like what is masculine and feminine type of roles. So let's get to the point, right? What are we here for? Demystifying a lot of misconceptions. We've talked about already the engineering marvels, agricultural ways of Mexica during the creating the city of Tenochtitlan. Just about, we all remember 2019. It sucked. And that was also the year 500th anniversary of the fall of Tenochtitlan. In the city of Mexico City, where it used to be Tenochtitlan, the Mexicans had this huge celebration commemorating that event. They recreated Temple Mayor. That has long been destroyed, but they recreated it. And even at nighttime, they had projections like TV screen, talking about the whole history of the Mexica, the rise, the eagle coming down, all of that. Here you have Cuauhtemoc, the last of the Mexica warriors, kings. You have Mexica dancers, still the legacy left behind. Right? These are dancers, and a lot of this is oral history that gets passed along from one generation to the next, especially after conquest, symbolisms that we see being described. And so when we hear or look at it, when we see Mexicas being depicted in Mexico, it's different, it's family, it's fun, it's celebratory. But then we get to the United States, it's a little different. It's a little different. Here we have like Mel Gibson's Apocalypto. Yes, it's based on the Maya, but it gets conflated, Maya, Aztecs, and Mel Gibson focus on human sacrifice, right? We're gonna get to that. I know that's a big one. We're gonna talk about the heart, right? We're gonna get there. So just the fascination of it. So even online when you do searching about the Aztecs, a lot it's cannibalism, it's sacrifice, it's violence, warfare. It's never about other things, the engineering, their philosophy, the deities, but it's all this fixation on sacrifice and warfare. Even on Twitter, right around that same time period, right? You have, the Mexicans weren't very bright there. They thought the bearded white dudes were gods. We're going to talk about that. It's not true. They got good. If there were ever people needing to be conquered, it was the inhumanly savage Aztecs. Ooh, yeah, so where does this all come from, right? And I was I was interacting with my colleague, Stan Rodriguez. He teaches at Grossmont College and Community Studies. And he talked about this interaction that they're having with an individual. They were protesting the statue of Columbus. And anyway, someone was getting upset at him. It's like, how can you get upset about Columbus? And he's saying this to an indigenous person. It's like, ugh. But his reaction was interesting. Like, it's not her fault. It's what has been taught. He's been taught the same way. It's how we re-educate or educate ourselves, right? And how we go from this to understanding. Moving past that single narrative, that single story that's always ingrained of savage, barbarian, heathen. How do we get past that? Oh, this one right here. One of the presidents of the state of Oregon in Spain celebrate the conquest of Tenochtitlan. It's like, I'm glad we did it. And then the Mexican president like, yeah, can you say you're sorry? And he was like, no. So anyway, there's no way. Where do we get this savage, barbarian heathen? A lot of it comes from Mr. Columbus. A lot of these words are used as a way for rationale for exploitation, for violence that we get, and a lot of it. Let me move to the next slide right here. Like the term cannibal, he invented it. It was his interactions with the Taino people. The Taino were the first indigenous people that met with him in the Caribbean islands, in the Caribbean, and there were stories that the Taino told him of these Caribe people. They'll come over and hurt us and eat us. And so Columbus, sent this letter to Queen Isabella. It's like, hey, we gotta help out these poor Taino people from these man-eating Caribs, right? And so Queen Isabella's like, yeah, I don't want that. No, eating humans is bad. Keep in mind, within Catholicism and in Orthodox Christianity, when you celebrate communion, you're eating the physical body of Christ. It's different in Protestantism, but Isabella, Catholic, Columbus, Catholic, they're partaking every Sunday in eating human flesh. Food for thought. No, not food for thought. But it's Caribe that gets changed, right? To somehow to cannibal. And even the Caribbean islands, I will show you that today. So what Queen Isabella says, or puts an edict on, is anybody who consumes human flesh shall be executed and put into slavery. So that's easy. It's like, all right, you're a cannibal, you're a cannibal, you're a cannibal, you're a cannibal. Go work for me. Isabel's all the way in Spain. No one's checking it. No one's checking it. So that provides justification for forced labor and the treatment of the Taino and other indigenous people in the Americas. Also keeping in mind the same time period, Europeans besides the communion are also eating human flesh. Mamia was widespread. What is this? They would get ground up human bones from mummies, grind it up and make it into elixir, and drink it for ailments. They would. They really would. And so, mamia, and they would even have there's going to be black market stuff, right? That's why a lot of fences around the cemeteries. It's not to keep the spirits out. It's to keep those black market people coming in, it's taking out bodies, exhuming all that to create mamia. Mamia was very popular at this time. So keep in mind, so the accusations of cannibalism is a way for justification of conquest and forced labor on various groups of people. And this is what allowed Columbus to force labor on the Taino people and will allow later for other Europeans, Spanish, Portuguese, British, and French to justify conquest by labeling. And then our Spanish colonization. The Spanish would use Cuba as their major form of colonization. When we look at it strategically, it's very close. It's in the Caribbean islands, very close to South America. It's right here by the Yucatan into North America, Central America, and Florida is right over here. So it's a major kind of landing port for the Spanish. So after the Spanish are in Santo Domingo, they'll go to Puerto Rico, colonize, and they go to Cuba. The next wave is into the Americas. Now, before we go with Cortez, Cortez was never charged of going and sacking Tenochtitlan. He actually asked the governor, and the governor is the second up to the viceroy in colonial Spain. And he asked him, hey, can we go, it's like a city made of gold, let's go get it. And he was like, no. So, like any other 5-year-old that doesn't get his way, it's like, fine, I'm going to tell grandma. And that's essentially what he does. Instead of grandma, it's King Charles V. So, Hernan Cortez doesn't get his way and says, fine, I'm not going to ask the governor, I'm going to ask King Charles V. And he sends a letter to King Charles V hey, I want to do this, and it's a crusading mentality, gold, glory, and God. And this crusading mentality has been ingrained with a lot of Spanish, going all the way back to the 700s to the 1500s, right? This is for the Spanish, the Star Wars, Pokemon, all these action heroes, Marvel, that's what gets ingrained with a lot of these Spanish young men and women. It's this mindset of gold pouring God. There's an opportunity here to conquer these heathens for God, for glory, not just for Cortez, but for King Charles, and gold, lots of gold. Charles V gets the letter. He throws it away. There's a Christian monk causing havoc at the same time named Martin Luther. So for Charles V, he's more worried about Martin Luther and the unity of the Christian church than with some knucklehead that wants to go on a suicide mission. It's like, I'll let the governor deal with that guy. So, let us begin with the myths of demystify a lot of the myths of the Aztecs. First, again, they were not seen as, Spaniards were not seen as gods. In any of the texts, both by contemporary Spanish and also later Mexica, never called them gods or return of Quetzalcoatl. Never. Even in Cortez letters, the closest we get is Cortez saying they thought I was God-like. Now, what does that come from? Well, going back to the pantheon of the Mexica deities, from which the Apotzli, Coligüe, all of them, their major deities never touched the ground. They were carried by other lesser beings, like a porter, right? They were carried. And the Spanish were on horses, being godlike. They were carried by lesser beings. Nothing that there was a return of these gods. Or like that one post, they thought they were God. No, not at all. Not at all. It just reinforces superstition and gullibility that the Mexica Aztecs were dumb and just thought this was a new wave of conquerors coming in. Another thing is the terminology of just saying Cortez and the conquest. Because it's more of a native revolt than a Spanish takeover. Because there's hundreds and thousands of indigenous groups compared to the hundreds of Spanish. I know. But Jared Diamond, his book, Guns, Germs, and Steel. Get that book, I know it's in your house, put it in the blue bin. Don't send it to a used bookstore, some other kid's gonna get it. Just recycle it. Guns, Germs, and Steel, Jared Diamond. It's a lot of, in academia, a lot of backlash because of his lack of academic rigor, of things that he forgot about. And we'll talk about it because guns were inefficient. They're not the handguns or AR-45s of today. These were long muskets. You had to keep the gunpowder dry. This is not a very dry environment. You had to pack the gunpowder in, pack it in tight, put the musket ball in, then get your fuse out, get your flint, light it up, and say, please, Mr. Aztec, please stop running at me. I need to pack my rifle right now. No, they're not going to do that. No, hablo español. And so they're not going to do that. Germs. Yes, germs did take a major toll in Tenochtitlan with smallpox. We'll get to that shortly. But the hundreds of thousands of Tlaxcalans and Totonacs and other groups would have been wiped out as well. They were not, right? So a lot of it is the immunities we have, right? Also, too, slavery, forced labor, other forms of work that forces people to be worn out, tired, and susceptible to more diseases. And that is going to contribute to smallpox having a major effect on groups. And the steel, it's a hot environment. The steel is not going to be worth anything. It's going to be heavy than anything. So these technologies, not as useful. And what Mr. Diamond forgets is the native alliances and the translators. That's going to be important in here. One of the major translators is La Malinche. Within Mexican and Mexican-American culture, she's seen as a traitor. Right? How could she do this to her people? One, it's not her people. She's not Mexica. She was a young lady from think about the Yucatec region, kind of like where the Maya. The Maya are still alive at this time. They're still alive today. So the Mayas, we don't know exactly where she's from, but she's from the southern part of Mexico, Yucatan. She's sold into slavery. The king that met with Cortez gifted her to him, well, other women. And so what we see is this relationship between Cortez and Malinche becomes very viable because what Malinche has is not just translation, but is the chisme, all the gossip. She knows the ins and outs of a lot of the gossip going on in the courts and what's being said. And it's not just Malinche, we have Aguilar. Aguilar was a Spanish conquistador. He gets shipwrecked, he gets rescued by the Maya. He learns Maya, he knows Spanish. He's able to communicate with Malinche. I mean, you have this combination that will make Malinche a valuable asset to Cortez, as well as to the indigenous groups like the Tlaxcalans. And along the images that we have, Malinche is center figure. She's everywhere. And she's active. She's very active. She's not passive in the conquest of Tenochtitlan. She is very active in her role. Even here at Tlatelolco, she's talking, she's making things. She's also seen wearing shields and swords. So in fact, she's actually an indigenous conquistadora. She's aligned herself with the Spanish. Her own people sold her to slavery. Another group of people gifted her off. So I can also make do with this knucklehead. Right? And so she's doing well. This is from Bernal Diaz in the Conquest of Mexico. This woman, La Malinche, was a valuable instrument to us in the conquest of New Spain. It was through her only, under the protection of the Almighty, that many things were accomplished by us. Without her, we never should have understood the Mexican language, and upon the whole, have been unable to surmount many difficulties. She is vital. She is vital not as a translator, but as an agent of understanding what is going on in ins and outs of the city. One great example, is a horrible story, is the Cholula massacre. Cholula itself is a city-state. Named after the hot sauce. It's a city-state aligned with the Mexica. This elderly woman came up to Malinche and said, "Hey, mija, you need to leave. They're going to attack the Spanish and Tlaxcalans tonight. You need to go. The Cholulans are going to come and attack them." Malinche goes and tells Cortez. Cortez rounds up everyone. Men, women, and children. Kills them all. Kills them all. This freaks out the Mexica. How barbaric. I don't know what? Yeah, for the Mexica, this is barbaric. For the Mexica, when I get to ritualized sacrifice very soon, you guys are waiting for it. But the point of war is to have captives for ritualized sacrifice and for work. It's never about wasting blood, and never women and children. Never women and children in fighting. To do that, it was incomprehensible for the Mexica. Like, what happened here? They couldn't understand it. They were like, no, it couldn't be a mistake. But in one of the other sources, is Malinche commands an attack. She's very much active in the conquest with the Tlaxcalans and the Spanish in the conquest of Tenochtitlan and in this scene. So Tlaxcalans, Totonacs, other groups, hundreds of thousands of indigenous groups that participate. You have about 400 original Spanish and more come to join Cortez calls. Pretty much Cortez made them jump ship. They came to get Cortez and send him back because that governor was like, dude, you're coming back to Cuba, you're under arrest. Cortez like, guys, there's a place of gold. Join me or you can arrest me. And they're like, okay, we'll join you. 1,300 compared to hundreds of thousands of indigenous allies, and also what the indigenous allies provide as well. Porters, servants. One group, the Cebulan, provide 4,000 porters for the 1,300 Spanish. Tlaxcala is like, oh, we can do better. 80,000 porters for the poor 1,300 Spanish, so that they carry their weapons and their steel. Ay, pobrecitos, right? But it's what the Tlaxcalans were willing to do. And it wasn't just the workers, but women. Women for either for sexual use, to relieve the Spanish men, to ensure there's no sexualized violence. And the women also serving as food, providing food. I mean, the Spanish are getting like the first taste of the taco trucks at this time, right? The food, the intimacy, all these things, medicine, are all vital, all provided for free by the Tlaxcalans and their other allies to overthrow the hegemony, the power of the Mexica. Remember, it's not a centralized empire. All these city-states are loosely aligned pay tribute. Tlaxcalans never bent the knee, never vassals, and so they're like, hey, we're just going to get rid of these guys, and we're going to do it. And they're utilizing all these groups right here that are not been labeled in that region to overthrow Tenochtitlan. So this one professor Bernardo says, it's more correct to say that the Spanish helped the Tlaxcalans defeat their enemies. Tlaxcalans finally getting after, because, well, Mexica, that's a nice word. They never bent the knee. But now it's like, oh, we can get rid of the Mexica now. The superiority of the military, right? The rifle. We talked about the use of rifles. One conquistador said that the only thing you could do with your rifle was to turn it around and use the butt of it as a club. It's the only thing you can use. Where you have the Mexica coming with their own clubs that have obsidian blades on the side of it. So there's a rumor, I don't know how true it is, that one Mexica warrior was able to decapitate a horse with one of those blade swords. I don't know how true it is or not. It was in the Spanish swords, I don't know. But those things are sharp. The obsidian knives are sharp. Tens of thousands of indigenous allies were used in the fighting. It wasn't just the Spanish, but the hundreds and thousands of the Tlaxcalans and other native allies. And here's Bernardo talking about the Mexica. We'll get to this right here. Our cannon, muskets, crossbows, and lances did certainly create havoc among the enemy's rank, who in fact rushed up on our weapons, yet they continued to combat them with the same fury and closed their ranks more firmly, nor could we drive them back a single inch. Yeah, guns, but with the guns, the muskets, they couldn't drive the Mexica out. They kept coming in waves, non-stop, the fury, just the ferocity, non-stop. Bernardo isn't saying like, oh, these guys are wimps. He's like, shit, why can't they stop? Please stop. I'm tired. And he talks about it. So it's interesting where Bernardo is, highlighting those places. And Cortez and his letters at Tenochtitlan. Like, this place is amazing. It's the Venice of the New World. Right? They're amazed at these places. Amazed. And let's not forget the women, conquistadoras. Not just La Malinche, but other women that participated as well. A lot of times there's a whole bunch of sausage fest thinking that it's conquistadors only. But there was a lot of conquistadors had wives. The wives came too. And the wives served as nurses, doctors. This one, Isabel Rodriguez, was an honorary doctor in New Spain because of her knowledge of medicines and healing. So you have the Tlaxcalans providing women for medicine. You have the Spanish coming with their own medicine as well to look after the Spanish. And you have Beatriz Palacio, traveling with Cortez, traveling with her father. So you have, it's not just the conquistadors themselves, but the women that are coming too. And they participated in the fighting. La Noche Triste is the kind of like the escape room for the Spanish and Tlaxcalans. They're trapped in Tenochtitlan. They just killed Montezuma. They killed a whole bunch of priests in the priestly square. The Mexica are mad. They're coming after them. And there's only one causeway to get out of there. And so they fight to the death to get out of there. And it wasn't just the conquistador men. It was the women. They participated in that as well. This one, Maria de Estrada, also participated. I like her quote. We're going to go to her quote on the next one. It is not right that the Spanish women leave their husbands when they go to war, as where they die, we die, because the Indians need to understand that the Spaniards are so brave that even their women know how to fight. So that's, I'm scared, right? But again, the tenacity, the veracity, just all this, they're going to go and fight. They're not afraid. So it's not just the Spanish men, but the women that participate as nurses, wives, healers, as well as the indigenous allies during this period. Then we get to Montezuma. And Montezuma sometimes gets labeled as a weak, incompetent ruler. Political structure is not dynastic. He was chosen. He was the best one over the other cousins. How smart he was. He took down threats of war. He made new tributary states. What's interesting what Montezuma did when he interacted with Cortez and the Tlaxcalans came into Tenochtitlan, he gave them a place, a residential place, in his zoo. The Tenochtitlan had a zoo. Well, think about it. We have a zoo. We have a great zoo. We have the best zoo. We go there, we can watch the giant pandas from a safe distance. We can see the jaguars, the elephants. You can look and observe and see what's going on without threat of violence. And think about what you're going to do next. That's essentially what Montezuma is doing. He put them at the zoo to observe them, to observe the Spanish. How can I flip these guys? How can I flip them to being with the Tlaxcalans, flip them on my side? So they do some ritual sacrifice and stuff like that, kind of freak them out a bit. That's what they do, right? To get them to bend the knee, like, oh, we don't want to be the Tlaxcalans anymore. But Montezuma was not an inept ruler. He was very keen. Sadly, he would be, well, sources argue against itself. It was either the Spanish that killed him, or the Mexica killed him in a revolt. So it's hard to say, but it's in both sources. But if I had my money, I would say it was the Spanish. Ritualistic sacrifice. This wasn't done on a mass scale. It wasn't a conveyor belt of humans up and down the temple to rip out every heart. It wasn't, the Temple Mayor wasn't just drowned in blood. It was ritualistic. Keep in mind that within the Mexica pantheon, their gods gave up their life and gave up blood to bring humans. Humans within the Mexica pantheon are born from the dead, decaying bodies of the gods. So you're returning the favor. And it's only the elite that they go after. So if a tributary say, like let's say Tlaxcala never bent the knee, they will capture, they went to war, a Tlaxcalan prince. Never a commoner, never a porter, someone of high rank. High rank. So if the Mexica came here, it would probably be the president of the museum. But you'll be honored. That's another thing. You'll be honored and deified. You'll be a goddess. It's like we're never going to have it ever again. But that was the mentality. And for the Spanish, they couldn't fathom this. They couldn't understand this practice. Ritualistic sacrifice. They couldn't get it, even though within Christianity, I mean, you have the biggest sacrifice right there, right? And so with Jesus, so it's interesting, like for the Spanish, they couldn't understand this. For the Mexica, it wasn't about wasting blood. It was about preservation blood. It was part of the cycles that they did. At the same time, you have public execution of people in Europe going on in a mass scale. Being drawn and quartered, being physically tortured, all during the same time. So when our barbaric heathen Aztecs are conducting ritualized sacrifice, that are freaking out that the Spanish and Tlaxcalans will kill women and children, we have, European groups, English, committing atrocities to people. It's the same period that we have with the witch hunting. I call it the genocide of women during this period. Of women and colonial women. Hundreds of thousands of women, all within their age range, were executed at this time. The same period, right? And so it's that mentality. Why we get so fixated? Even when we Google search Aztecs, sacrifice, 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 right? It's never like, damn, look what the English did to the commoners, to the women. Right? Never this. It's never this. So it's quite fascinating that we have this legacy and understanding how a single narrative, a single story can sometimes just encase and just vilify a group of people without understanding the culture and ideas behind it. The conquest of Tenochtitlan, complete 1521, not true. It just fell into the hands of the Tlaxcalans. They're actually Mexica nobles will actually still be in charge in different regions. 1524, we have the noble lords of Tenochtitlan writing to the Spanish like, hey, we're not giving up our gods. Bad enough we lost our political state, now we're vassals. You can't force this new religion on us. They're still around. They didn't go away. Even to the 1700s, there's images of artistic works of both the Spanish colonial Spanish society, and the back there's images of indigenous people making these garlands, these long flowers, right, for religious purposes. And a lot of it are made by Mexica, and they're still around. Now, like the specific Mexica, probably not still around, but the language of Nahuatl still spoken. And there's 60 different other indigenous groups in Mexico, besides the Mexica. And over 60 different languages, and 350 other dialects. I mean, the Zapotec is still spoken in Oaxaca today. So indigenous practices that are still used, still around. Dia de los Muertos, that's a Mexica a festival. It's still practiced to this day. And the legacy, like the movie Coco and the life, the Book of Life, it's still around. And even until today, there's a Santa Muerte. It's this new deity. It's a popular religion that's been very popular in Mexico lately, and parts of different Latin American countries. Santa Muerte. It's a saint death, where you have this deity that brings a lot of the marginalized groups, you know, the drug addicts, the drunkards and all that, and everybody. She brings all these people together, those that have kind of been forgotten about. Catholic Church is like, no, it's not a saint, don't venerate it. But it's interesting that still that continued spiritual conquest. The political conquest happened, but the spiritual conquest, the purpose was to, I love my students, they don't understand what the word eradicate means. The purpose was to eradicate indigenous beliefs and religion. Dia de los Muertos is still around, still practiced. Santa Muerte, in a way, is still kind of that continued spiritual conquest, right? And even the cultural syncretism that occurs. The Virgen de Guadalupe, she was, Juan Diego sees the apparition 10 years after the destruction of Tonantzint's temple. Right? So, for some, like the Virgen de Guadalupe reflects this new mestizo, mixed race identity, this blending of Spanish and indigenous. And even the images of the Virgen de Guadalupe, the sun, moon, and stars, they're all reflective of Tonantzin, and she's a veneration of Coligüe, and she's carried on. The images are right there, but if you've seen it, Virgen de Guadalupe is carried by a little angel, a lesser being. And the feathers are eagle feathers, which is the Apochtli. And in Christian and Islamic art, angel feathers are very bright white. But the traditions, that legacy, the fighting of maintaining the practice still around. It's quite fascinating. So even barbarians, well, they weren't that. They're much more than that. You know, from making calendars to freshwater aqueducts to making food, types of food, medicines, artisans, engineers, agriculturalists, entertainers, philosophers. There were more than just that. Very complex peoples that created this monumental city of Tenochtitlan, a vibrant, multicultural trading center that created these. They didn't use zero. That was their neighbors, the Maya. But they had a mathematics system. Mathematics is important, especially for agriculture and taxes and trade. Since they're a tributary state, numbers are very important. I usually tell my students that because like all ancient sources, a lot of them about taxation and accounting. It's very important. But calendar systems, medicines, and the types of medicines that are used. And also how to perform different splints on fractures, bone fractures. Right? So all these different type of medicines, the knowledge of these different plants, the bonding is very important for a lot of the Mexica, a lot of the cultural achievements. Now I'll leave this one up here. If you're interested, a couple of books present about the Mexica. I do have two here. These are mine. If you like to see, one is a fairly new one. It's Camilla Townsend, The Fifth Son. It does a new history of the Mexica Aztec from a lot from the Mexica sources. A lot of the Nahuatl sources, so it provides a lot more detail from a different point of view of Mexica. This one's brand new, On Savage Shores. It's about the indigenous people's interactions with Europeans and how that they thought. So instead of like the opposite of what like Europeans thought of indigenous groups, what the indigenous people thought of when they interacted with Europeans as well. Some really cool podcasts if you get a chance to. I was telling Vincent this too. There's a website called New Books Network. You go on there and type in whatever subject matter, and it's all podcasts. You get about an hour discussion from that author being interviewed by an academic. And so it's very useful, very helpful. And there's some really cool YouTube videos. Professor Estrada from Long Beach City College has this nice YouTube channel. He's a historian of the Americas. And Matthew Rostal, he's a prolific historian in Latin American studies with Mexica and Maya, if you get a chance to look at that. But thank you all for listening. I appreciate your time. I'll leave that up there if you guys want to break it down. Sure, we have questions. They don't have questions, that's all right.
I was just thinking, we talking about how one group or conquering group looks at another, and I'm remembering the Roman Empire. The Romans used to go to the Colosseum for sport to watch people killing each other, gladiators.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a reflection of the evolution of civilization, over time.
Yeah, and Vincent, you make a good point too, because when we say civilization, it's Western civilization. The Romans are Western civilization. Us, the United States, we're a product of Western civilization. And the Mexica Aztecs really don't fall into Western civilization. It's the Spanish that come in and that interaction, and we talk about development of race and sacrifice. But the Greeks are a product of Western civilization. But we don't talk a lot about the misogyny with a lot of the Greek philosophers, or the horrific acts that the Romans did, right? From gladiators or to acts of crucifixion, right? Like Spartacus, and like 6,000 slaves that are crucified on Appian Way. That's a lot. That's a lot. So yeah, but I think a lot is that tradition. We don't talk about the witches and stuff, because our culture is ingrained with English colonialism, right? We're not going to talk bad about the witchcraft. Like, Salem witchcraft happened, it's funny, it's Halloween. But, we committed genocide to women.
I mean, when you're talking about the different groupings within, like the
Totonacs
and they obviously, some of them had reasons for looking down on the others, and they made war with each other still, and they organized around forms of agriculture, and that's sort of an materialistic view of things, I guess.
Yeah.
Will you explain to me Aztecs, Mayans?
Two different cultures.
Different time periods,
different time periods. Different time. The Mexica come in about 1100 to about 1400. The Maya have been around, I would say, almost 200 CE. They've been around a long time. They never created an empire. It was kind of loosely, and it's something similar we see through different Mesoamerican cultures. It's never a united empire. There are different city-states that fought each other. This one city-state, Teotihuacan, they interacted with the Maya. The Zapotecs also interacted with the Maya. Love and peace and war, depending on. But the Maya are a different group. Still around, and also dealing with a lot of injustices in Mexico and different parts like Guatemala and stuff. Just a lot of the casta system and stuff like that. But that's the difference between the Maya and the Aztecs. The different cultures, different general localities.
And different time frames.
Yes. And the Maya actually was a longer period, but usually we break it up to classical and pre-classical periods, depending on the city-state. Like Chichen Itza is usually post-classical. You'll have Palenque during the classical period, 300s and 400s. Chichen Itza is usually later, the contemporary to Tenochtitlan. Contemporary. But then it kind of wanes away when Spanish comes. You got it. Yes, sir.
So San Diego State used to have the Aztec warrior as their person. Why do you think that they don't have that anymore?
I think, I don't know.
It
'Cause
represents
it represents,
fighting.
it represents fighting warriors. I think it's also, can become characterized.
But I saw your couple of beautiful pictures of the warrior up there, with the plumage and the breastplate, and the jacket, whatever you call them. And that's the same thing as the Aztec warrior was trying to duplicate, I think.
I think when society stops labeling the Mexica Aztecs as savage heathens, then I think it'll be okay to bring back the Aztec warrior. All right, I'm gonna go get some wine.